Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories they're covering this week, where the headlines are going next. I'm Sarah Westwood, and I'm here today with Editor-in-Chief Hugo Gurdon. And Hugo, let's talk about Donald Trump's influence over the primaries. We're through the Pennsylvania Senate GOP primary, one of those highly anticipated races. The time of this taping right now, still too close to call. And you wrote in your column this week that even if Dr. Oz, who seems to have a tiny little lead right now, does manage to pull out a victory, you won't see that as a particularly significant victory for Trump, who endorsed him. Why is that?
Well, partly because it's so close. I mean, one of the things that you want, particularly if you're Donald Trump, when you endorse someone, is for them to have a kind of thumping victory. And it's clear that Dr. Oz has not done that, and it may be that after the recount, which is likely, McCormick will have beaten Dr. Oz, which would obviously be a defeat for Trump. The other thing about it, and there's various things which muddied the water in that race. The other is that Kathy Barnett, who is this sort of somewhat wayward, unknown quantity, suddenly surged a couple of weeks before Election Day, and she seemed to be in the lead. And then because she was in the lead, she got a lot of scrutiny, and the scrutiny, because she has somewhat of a sketchy resume and seemed not to want to answer various questions, meant that she faded again. But there are a number of people in Pennsylvania voters, and indeed she said herself that she was sort of more MAGA than the other two candidates, even though Dr. Oz was the one endorsed by Trump, that she was more authentic. And, there is something about the, very sort of smooth TV personality of Dr. Oz is a contrast with the sort of rough-edged Kathy Barnett, where somehow she seemed more MAGA. So the point that I was thinking is, to what extent did people who are MAGA voters vote for her and not for the Trump candidate? Mm-hmm. And to what extent is that to do with the fact that they are less interested now than they were, when Trump was president, in Trump the personality than in the ideas and the the way of being that Trump is, that sort of rough-hewn fighter that he is. So, I just think there's a number of ways in which the Pennsylvania Senate race doesn't really reflect very strongly on Trump.
In the Pennsylvania gubernatorial primary, the Republican candidate that emerged was Doug Mastriano,
right.
Who Trump did endorse, but you write that Mastriano didn't really need his endorsement because he was leading the whole time. So one, do you think that this was, a genuine endorsement from Trump, or maybe this practice that we see him doing, endorsing candidates that are already leading to sort of pad his record? And two, talk about why there are some Republicans who are nervous that Mastriano clinched the nomination.
Yeah, that's, Sarah, Trump clearly was jumping on a winning bandwagon. Mm-hmm. He endorsed Mastriano, who led from start to finish and was an obvious front runner and was a kind of shoo-in for this. He led for weeks and weeks and weeks, months, and it was only 3 days before the election that Donald Trump endorsed him. And that actually irritated a lot of people, Republicans in Pennsylvania, because they thought that it's perhaps helped cement Mastriano's win, and they don't think that he can win in November against the Democrat. It also, they thought it might help Kathy Barnett, because it would, by Donald Trump endorsing this very MAGA character, Mastriano, who was at the Capitol when it was stormed on January the 6th, and who worked diligently to overturn what he and Donald Trump were calling the stolen election. They don't know that he can win statewide when it comes to the general election, so they don't like the fact that he got the endorsement. And that played to some extent into the Senate race, because it boosted perhaps Barnett.
And finally, given that Trump is still trying to exert influence over electoral politics in the party and clearly going to try and take some credit for what's looking to be coming Republican successes in November, how can the party sort of start to move away from him towards what's next?
Well, I think that the party has to recognize that he had a very mixed night. He certainly had some great successes. One was, he very early on endorsed Ted Budd in North Carolina. That cleared the field, and Budd won handily. But he endorsed the losing candidate in Idaho. he's, you know, the Dr. Oz endorsement is sort of, it'll be a victory for him if Oz squeezes one out, but it's not a thumping victory. He endorsed Madison Cawthorn in North Carolina. Cawthorn lost primarily because he was such a terrible candidate and a terrible congressman, but nevertheless, you know, there was Trump backing the wrong person. So Trump's hold on the Republican Party, on Republicans, is weakening, but it's still strong. We're very well positioned to win in this November, particularly in the House, but perhaps also in the Senate. But Trump's influence is declining, and it needs, for the party's good and the country's good, to decline faster so that a new generation of Republican leaders like Ron DeSantis, Mike Pompeo, Tom Cotton, people like that can come to the fore who have quite a lot of that combative populist element that Trump brought to the party, but are more sort of rhetorically and intellectually engaged, or rhetorically restrained, intellectually engaged, and have some of those qualities of sort of executive competence that the Republican Party now needs to bring.
Well, Hugo, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more writing from Hugo and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.